Hello and welcome to the Driver of the Weekend video for the Styrian Grand Prix, the video series in which my massive data algorithm comprising of about 28 or 29 different categories, I keep forgetting as I keep adding slightly different ones and changing the way that it is scored, it overall decides the Driver of the Weekend. We'll then be comparing that score to my own opinion ranks made on the video released on Sunday to your guys' average audience ranks for each of the drivers as well, that I left in a link in the description of that video on Sunday. Now for a full explanation of each of the categories used in the data algorithm and also how my scoring system has vaguely slightly changed as well, I'll pop two videos in the cards in the corner. But the main gist of it is there are about 50% of them that look at your own individual performances isolated from your teammate, and then there are about 50% of them that do look at your teammate across all of the sessions in the weekend, practice, qualifying, and also the race. There is then a higher weighting that is given to those categories set in the individual setting, and then a lower weighting to those set in the teammate setting. So more impact is given to your own individual performances versus how you perform against your teammate. So with all of that out of the way, let us jump on into the Driver of the Weekend video for the Styrian Grand Prix and quickly bounce over the Driver of Practice, as this is not overly relevant to the overall impact of the algorithm. But it is interesting to note that Giovinazzi was technically the Driver of Practice, with Bottas and also Norris having a difficult practice session. But moving away from practice, we will now quickly take a look at the qualifying driver of the day. Now there is a significant spread in terms of the points distribution here. Now also just to let you know, 20 is the maximum possible score that you can achieve and 0 is the lowest score that you can possibly achieve. So Fernando Alonso and Pierre Gasly were both extremely highly rated in qualifying, with both Raikkonen and also Ricciardo not being highly rated in qualifying. And then taking a quick look at the race driver of the day. This was given to Max Verstappen only just by 0.4 of a point down to Lewis Hamilton. And then interestingly, Lando Norris was the third highest rated driver for the race, with Kimi Raikkonen coming in 4th and then Mick Schumacher coming in P5, with Lance Stroll and Carlos Sainz being just behind him. With the lower end of the field looking at Mazepin, Latifi, Leclerc as well, all the way down in that order. So even though he put in a stellar drive up the field, he was ranked relatively low. Then Sergio Perez, Pierre Gasly, Ricciardo and Tsunoda. Now this algorithm does not look at anything at all to do with overtakes, strategy, or anything that can introduce any sort of bias. This is just the raw numbers of exactly how well you've performed against yourself across the whole season in terms of averages, medians, means, etc, etc, and then your teammate performances, how well you perform against your teammate in all of the sessions, every single lap of the Grand Prix, what your pace is, where the car should be as well, which is again why Sergio Perez is a little bit down that order, as the car is so much quicker than the Mercedes, so it should be performing in P1 and P2. However, for most of the race he was running in P4, so for the category of where the car should be, Perez was ranked rather low. But then in order to determine the driver of the weekend, we need to combine all of these different scores. And we take 2% of the practice scores, 28% of the qualifying scores, and 70% of the overall race scores, and we end up with this order here. Max Verstappen was declared the driver of the weekend in the Styrian Grand Prix, only just, well, actually quite significantly, by 0.7 of a point, down to Lando Norris to Lewis Hamilton. There was then a fairly steep drop-off to Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll, who both had exceptional weekends, and then Valtteri Bottas, Mick Schumacher and George Russell were all joint on 11. With the people that were slightly underperforming in this Grand Prix, Sergio Perez, Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo. But now what we can do is we can compare these results here on screen, which are ordered now, to my own opinion ranks that I created on Sunday. Now I have slightly changed these, so I've kept Hamilton at 16 out of 20, I've bumped Bottas down to 15 out of 20, I've bumped Perez down to 14 out of 20, I have then risen Raikkonen to 13 out of 20 and Alonso up to 15 out of 20. But other than that, every single rank is identical to that I made on Sunday, and we can see that the comparisons for the top 3 are actually identical. My data algorithm has outputted the same order that I have put out. However, from there, it just completely and utterly changes. It has ranked Ocon, for example, in P14, whereas I slapped him all the way down at the bottom. We've vaguely put Russell in the same sort of place, and similar to Bottas as well, but that's about it. Then averaging out all of the audience ranks that were made on Sunday as well, we end up with this order here. You guys ranked Russell as the third best performing driver of the weekend, ahead of Lewis Hamilton, Valtteri Bottas, etc, etc. Interestingly, all three of these ranks have Verstappen and Norris as P1 and P2 for the Styrian Grand Prix. But if we look slightly lower down that leaderboard, we do have very similar bottom fours, my opinion ranks and the audience opinion ranks. However, I have Ricciardo a little bit higher up than you guys, whereas we all have Ocon, Mazepin and Vettel in the bottom four. But then what we can do from the Styrian Grand Prix driver ranks that are on screen is we can add them to all of the previous races that have happened this season, and for the data algorithm driver of the season, we end up with Max Verstappen on top by almost 10 points to Lando Norris, and George Russell, who is now P3 ahead of Lewis Hamilton, who is now ahead of Mick Schumacher. With the underperforming drivers of this season being Bottas, Ricciardo, Perez and Tsunoda. Where my summated opinion ranks look a little bit like this: Verstappen again on the top, Norris again P2, exactly the same as the data algorithm. However, I've gone for Hamilton in P3 so far, and actually Perez P4. Whereas I personally think that the underperforming drivers of this season are Tsunoda, Ocon, Latifi and Mazepin. And then adding up all of the audience average ranks so far, you guys have also put Max Verstappen in P1, but you've also put Lewis Hamilton as P2, the only one of us to do so. And interestingly as well, you have put Bottas as P3. You've rated Bottas' season so much better than myself and also the big data algorithm. With you guys, the audience, thinking that Latifi, Raikkonen, Tsunoda and also Mazepin are underperforming this season. But there we go, there is the end of the Driver of the Weekend video for the Styrian Grand Prix. Please, if there is anything that's on your mind about this opinions, whether you disagree or agree entirely, then please let me know in the comments down below and I'll be sure to respond to your comments. But that is all I've got for you today, guys. I hope you have enjoyed, and I will catch you in the next episode with whatever and whenever I decide to make it. I'll see you guys then.